Okay, so this is the second video for week 2 of Unit 1, where we're talking about Matsuo Basho's The Narrow Road to Oku, right? This section I'm going to give you a quick crash course in an easy system we can use to start unpacking talking about poetry, okay? The basic gist I used to give high school students when I would teach them to analyze poetry, especially on the fly for like APs and things like that, is let's break poetry down into 4 broad stroke terms that are by no means prescriptive. They're not the end all be all, but they give us things that we can anchor a discussion to, right? So we're going to go through all 4. The first one is perhaps on the page both the most obvious and the most complicated, or rather the most needing of technical understanding, and that's structure. What we mean by structure in this sense is physically, what does the poem look like? What is it doing? How is it shaped? Okay, what are things like its poetic feet, which we'll talk about in more nuance in the next video, but namely, what are the units of the poem? How is it broken down? How are the lines broken? Does it rhyme? How long are the stanza? How many lines are there? These kind of structural, literally scaffolded decisions used to make the poem and their existence. Okay. Second to that, we have perhaps the one that is the most interesting to us in a translation sense, though, as you'll see when we talk about haiku, structure comes up a lot in this, as has a lot of reference to translation when it comes to Japanese as well, is the idea of the second one, language, right? What I mean by this is literally the as it is on the tin, words on the page. What is written there? What is it saying? What is the image it's trying to show you, right? We're not talking about where we speculate and we put meaning to that. That's going to come later, but just literally exactly what's on the page. What is the poet showing me? We can talk later about what this red rose means in relation to love, but the base language is he decided to refer to a red rose, right? Or she decided to talk about, death not stopping, right? What does death look like? What does the horse look like for death's carriage, right? Things like that, right? The specific language chosen. Why did they choose this language? What does it show us? How do we react to it? Okay. Next, content, right? So we have the specific language of like, why are these words chosen? We had the structure of why is the poem built this way, right? Like, how is the poem built? Content is, again, a very look at it and see it. What's in the poem, right? It's a poem about, without speculating, it's a Frost poem, and it's about walking by a forest on a snowy evening and then going home. It's about admiring the neighbor's fence. It's about a spider standing on a flower in the woods, right? Basic. What is the image that we're going to unpack in metaphor, right? The last one is where we do a lot of that unpacking. It's where we get a little more speculative and interpretive, and it's the idea of intent, right? Cool. The poet showed you red rose in this poem for whatever reason, right? Now it's time to decide why we think that reason is. Why did the poet do this, right? What were they trying to do? What is the intention behind the words, right? Now, there's plenty to be said about the idea of death of the author. We are certainly going to talk about that, particularly and probably most forcefully when we get to Neruda, right? And Hikmet both, right? But on a basic level, I'm curious to see what you think is going on here. What's the theme? What's actually happening, right? We just did the very basic, what's the poem about? It's about a bug on a flower. Cool, but what's it about, right? There is an inherently kind of extra level to this. What is the poet trying to do to us as readers? What are they trying to accomplish? Where are the words trying to take us, right? That's what the intent is, right? The kind of final caveat to all this, which is perhaps apparent after a brief discussion like that, is that these things are not mutually exclusive, right? This decision to pick specific words can be an issue of language, it can be an issue of structure, it can be an issue of content, right? Like they wanted to show, it's about a spider, so they used spider, they used this specific word for spider. They use spider in that spot in the line because it rhymed, which fits the structure. And the intention of them showing us the spider was to put us, to make us no longer at ease, right? Great. One piece of information can be kind of nitpicked from all four of those, and sometimes they overlap and interact with each other. If you've taken, for example, like a composition or a rhetoric class, you know that when we talk about things like the rhetorical concepts, which we'll get to when we talk about Aristotle later in the semester, but logos, ethos, and pathos are not always, something is not always logos, ethos, or pathos. It depends on other factors, right? They interact and overlap with each other. This is very much the case with these four. So the reason I brought this up is because, again, many people don't get a lot of time to read poetry when they're in high school. And this is a relatively early survey class. I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't had a chance to be exposed to too much poetry here in college yet. So if you're daunted by it, right, by all means, come back to these four, look at the poem, kind of break it up, make some notes on each one of these, and then write from there. If you feel comfortable, this is in no way prescriptive. You don't have to write in accordance with this, relatively arbitrary, but in the past effective, 4-tier system I've, made to make quick notes for discussion, right? Do what you will, entirely fine. If you don't use the system, it's not going to affect your grade versus using it, as long as both of you are fulfilling the assignment otherwise. It's just a toolbox that's there in case you need it. Okay. The next video, which will be the second to last, is going to be on haiku specifically, and we're going to run through some of the difficulties that come with translating it.